Entering the violent and illegal world of narcotraficantes can be a seamless process of a boy joining a gang to make money and acquire popularity in the criminal underworld. But there are usually just two exit points. One is a life in the cage, and the other is death. The Scorpion, Francisco Rafael Arellano Felix, was one of those who paid the ultimate price for their participation in organized crime, and it wasn't in pesos. You're about to learn about the beginning and end of one of the highest-ranking officers of one of the deadliest criminal groups in the history of Mexico. This video was made for you. You should give it a thumbs up to help others like you find this amazing content. And don't forget to click subscribe for more like it. On the 24th of October 1949, Francisco Rafael Arellano Felix was born in Culiacan, Sinaloa, to Benjamín Francisco Arellano Sanchez and Norma Alicia Felix Zazueta. The couple had grown up apart until Benjamín Francisco moved from Durango in the 1940s to meet his wife in Sinaloa. Together, they had 11 children, 7 boys, Francisco Rafael, Benjamín, Carlos Alberto, Eduardo, Ramón Eduardo, Luis Fernando, Francisco Javier, and 4 girls, Alicia María, Enedina, Norma Isabel, and Leticia, with Francisco Rafael being their eldest son. Francisco Rafael and his siblings grew up in a modest home on Miguel Hidalgo Street, named after Mexico's founding father. The house at number 566, where Francisco Rafael spent most of his first 20 years in life, was only a few blocks away from the Autonomous University of Sinaloa, and according to the neighbors of the Arellanos, Francisco Rafael and his brothers were cheerful boys with no signs of criminal tendencies who sold legally acquired clothes, liquor, and candy brought from the US. Francisco Rafael completed his elementary education at Alvaro Obregon Elementary School and moved on to Emilio Obeso Middle School, where he would drop out early to assist his father, who was a mechanic. By then, he had started smuggling prohibited items from Tijuana with his brothers Ramón and Benjamín. This must have been the eldest Arellanos boys' venture into the crime world. The trio also shown particular interest in music and even formed a music group called Sonido es Scorpion. In the 1970s, the family moved to Guadalajara, Jalisco, but Francisco Rafael, who was now a young adult at over 20 years, stayed back in Culiacan to manage a successful event center called El Chaplin. He then moved to south of Sinaloa and left Culiacan for Mazatlan, where he started a big disco called Frankie O that became an important place for Mazatlan night partiers in the mid-1980s. In the middle of the national economic crisis of this time, Mexico recorded a meager 0.1 GDP growth per year, and becoming unable to service its national debt, Francisco Rafael opened a high-class nightclub with a reported $5 million investment. Just so you can get the enormity of the scale of the facility, it had a large dance floor surrounded by fish tanks, interior waterfalls, and a capacity to house 2,500 people at once. The zoo-themed club had an assortment of wildlife that included 2 lions. Francisco Rafael was a Scorpio, and apparently, he felt very fond of his astrological sign. He was known to wear a diamond-encrusted scorpion neckpiece, and the scorpion was also Frankie O's symbol. There was even a colossal representation of the arachnid in the form of a metal sculpture at a water fountain in the establishment. The nightclub also had performances from big names in the music industry, such as Luis Miguel, Emmanuel, Mijares, Nelson Ned, and Ricardo Montaner, to name a few. It featured car and motorcycle shows, where Francisco Rafael himself regularly performed on his Harley-Davidson motorcycle. He also organized sports competitions, beauty contests, and appeared in social magazines. He was very much the superstar in Mazatlan, with the success of his enterprises earning him the award for Businessman of the Year from a Mazatlan local radio station. El Escorpion, as he was known, was living the celebrity life as a renowned businessman, playboy, and a very close friend of boxing world champion Julio Cesar Chavez. At that time, his brother Benjamín and Ramón had become players in the drug trade after moving to Tijuana in the 1980s. He had 3 children, 2 boys, Francisco and Benjamín, and a daughter from his first marriage to Victoria Barrionuevo before separating from her. He reportedly kidnapped his next wife, a 17-year-old, Rocio del Carmen Lizarraga, after she won a beauty contest at a Mazatlan carnival. The Arellano Felix brothers were connected to organized crime through a drug trafficker, Jesus Labra Aviles, or El Chuy, who married their maternal aunt, Agustina Felix Zazueta. He worked under their uncle, Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo, Head of the multi-territorial Guadalajara cartel, Miguel Angel introduced the Arellano boys to the trade in Baja California, where Benjamín worked with Francisco Javier Caro Payan, alias the Doctor, cousin of Rafael Caro Quintero, who was wanted by Canada and America for running a drug trafficking network that involved American and Canadian officers and once made a gain of over $25 million in 7 months. After Caro Payan's arrest in 1987 by Canadian authorities, Benjamín started working full-time with Aviles and Francisco Rafael, Ramón, and Javier later joined them in Tijuana. In 1989, Miguel Angel, alias El Jefe de Jefes, or Boss of All Bosses, was arrested and sentenced to 40 years in prison for his involvement in the murder of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena. The Guadalajara cartel was fractured and splinters emerged with Sinaloa on the west coast, the Juarez cartel at the Ciudad Juarez border, and the Arellano Felix organization or Tijuana cartel as they took control of the Baja California border. In 1989, in a bid to solidify their presence and ensure cooperation from other families in the drug business of Baja California, the Arellano brothers ordered the decimation of the Machi Ramirez family, which had a strong hold on the drug business in Tijuana. The attempts of El Chapo and his partner Hector to seize control of Tijuana sparked a campaign of violence that went on for years and affected the Mexican states of Sonora, Baja California, Sinaloa, Durango, Jalisco, Guerrero, Oaxaca, and Michoacán. In 1989, El Chapo reportedly sent Armando Lopez, or El Rayo, a trusted associate of Chapo, to speak with the leaders of the Arellano Felix organization, but he was killed by Ramón, who was the group's enforcer before he got an audience with the brothers. His body was discovered in the outskirts of Tijuana, and the rest of his family was annihilated to prevent any possible retaliation. 2 years later, Ramón executed Rigoberto Campos Salcido, or El Rigo, which further stoked the fire of the armed conflict between the warring parties. In 1992, in their continued bid to root out all opposition to their authority, the Tijuana cartel ordered hits on Gallardo's lawyers and family members in Iguala, Guerrero, and those caught were kidnapped and killed. Hector Elguero Palma, Sinaloa boss and El Chapo's partner, planned a reprisal against the Arellanos at a Christine discotheque in Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco. Ramón and Francisco Rafael, who were the main targets of the assault, survived the attack untouched but lost 8 of their men in the incident. On the 24th of October, the struggle reached its peak and called for the authorities' full attention. While trying to assassinate El Chapo at the Guadalajara Airport, Tijuana cartel gunmen mistook a luxurious vehicle carrying the Archbishop of Guadalajara, Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo, to be holding El Chapo and opened fire at it. This culminated in the death of the clergy and 6 other civilians, while El Chapo reportedly escaped the scene in the taxi. On the 4th of December 1993, Francisco Rafael Arellano Felix was arrested by the Federal Judicial Police, or FJF, in Tijuana for charges of drug trafficking, legal use of weaponry under Mexican law, and complicity in the murder of Archbishop Ocampo. He was sentenced to 10 years and 3 months in prison. He spent his time in jail at the Social Readaptation Center No. 1, aka Altiplano, a maximum prison in Almoloya de Juarez in the state of Mexico. Before Francisco Rafael's arrest, he wasn't a prominent member of the Tijuana cartel's hierarchy, but he was known to coordinate the cartel's narcotics trade to the US. A 1980 US indictment had fingered him as a cocaine supplier in the San Diego area. To nab him, the DEA had set up an undercover operation that involved the purchase of a high quantity of cocaine to get evidence against him and his associates, and he admitted in court to sending Ramon Torrecillos Rendon and 4 others to sell 9 ounces of cocaine to the undercover DEA agent. He was arrested in the US on the 7th of August 1980 and released from detention after paying a $150,000 bond and promising to make court appearances, but in fear of incarceration, he fled to Mexico and missed a court hearing on 8th October 1980. On 2nd July 2003, the US requested his extradition from Mexico, and after a year, a federal judge approved his extradition, but he remained in Mexico until September 6, 2006, when he was flown by helicopter from Matamoros, Tamaulipas to Brownsville, Texas, where the US authorities received him. They immediately transferred him to California to await trial for his drug trafficking charges. On the 18th of June 2007, he pleaded guilty to possession and distribution of cocaine before US District Judge Irma E. Gonzalez in a San Diego court. In his testimony, he conceded to selling about 250 grams of cocaine to a supplier who negotiated with an undercover DEA agent in a motel in San Diego in 1980. In October 2007, he was sentenced to 6 years with the possibility of parole in 4 months as a result of the time he had already spent behind bars. Instead of 6 years, Francisco Rafael spent 1 year and 5 months in prison. He was released on March 4, 2008 and deported to Mexico via the Paso del Norte International Bridge, or Santa Fe, a 4-lane bridge for northbound non-commercial traffic which connects the US and Mexico through El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua. According to Mexican authorities, he was released into the crowd at the border and reportedly took a flight to Tijuana to see his wife and children. He moved back to Mazatlan before relocating to the middle-class neighborhood of Cumbres del Tezal with his wife. The neighborhood has a view of the popular Arco de Cabo San Lucas, the peculiar rock formation at the southern end of San Lucas. While living there, he went by the pseudonym Marco Vasquez and covered his identity with 3 long-term passions as a businessman, a motorcyclist, and a music producer. On the 18th of October, Francisco Rafael was attending a family gathering at Ocean House in a banquet hall owned by Hotel Marbella in Los Cabos, Baja California Sur. In attendance were many important personalities, including businessmen, political leaders, celebrities, and sportsmen such as former Mexican footballer Jared Borghetti and professional boxer and his friend Julio Cesar Chavez's son, Omar Chavez. The musical entertainment was provided by the likes of Banda La Cabena, El Mariachi de los Cabos, and the former leader of Banda El Recodo. At around 8 p.m., while the party was in full swing, eyewitnesses reported having seen a black SUV parked near the entrance of the ballroom with 2 men in the front seat and another man in a clown costume in the back seat. The clown got out of the SUV and walked into the party. He quickly identified Francisco Rafael in the middle of the party, walked up to him, and at a distance of about 1 meter, shot him and killed him on the spot. The assailant escaped through the back door, where the SUV was waiting. 4 shots were heard outside the ballroom, but according to eyewitnesses, they were warning shots to deter Francisco Rafael's son, who was chasing his father's shooter. The SUV sped off onto the adjoining highway and disappeared before the authorities arrived. When the authorities arrived, Francisco Rafael's wife, Rocio del Carmen Lizarraga, identified him, and the autopsy results showed he had died from a traumatic brain injury as a result of a shot to his head and another shot to his thorax. The bullets reportedly came from an FN-57 pistol. On October 19, 2013, Baja California Sur State Police escorted his remains and his family to the port of Pichilingue. His body was shipped by boat to Sinaloa, and people had thought his corpse would be cremated in Mazatlan, but he was cremated in Los Mochis, in the municipality of Ahome, on the 20th of October 2013. The investigation into his assassination was initially handled by the Baja California Sur authorities because it was outside federal jurisdiction, but the officer of the General Prosecutor (PGR) later joined in at the request of the state authorities. About 24 hours after the shooting of Francisco Rafael, Manuel Aguirre Galindo, or El Caballo, or the Horse, a high-profile member of the Tijuana cartel, was captured in Mexico City, where he'd been hiding. Reports from Zeta, a Tijuana-based magazine that reports on the activities of the Tijuana cartel, said the authorities were either tipped through information from the interrogations of members of Francisco Rafael's family or by cartel members who held El Caballo responsible for Francisco Rafael's death, since El Caballo was in charge of Francisco's security. There are 3 theories held by the authorities on the origin of the strike that took Francisco Rafael's life. Number 1. Authorities thought he might have been assassinated by the Beltran Leyva cartel, another powerful opposition to the Tijuana cartel or the Sinaloa, specifically on the orders of El Chapo, who thought Francisco Rafael ratted him out to the authorities, which led to his close shave with the nets of law enforcement in March 2012. Number 2. They believe it could have been an attack from a local Los Cabos trafficking gang led by Javier Lopez Rivera or Javier Acosta Lopez, alias El Javier or El Javi. He was believed to have sent 2 of his men to pick up the assassination, who came from Sinaloa at the Los Cabos International Airport. They also believe Tijuana cartel security men could have been complicit in Francisco Rafael's murder because the doors into the venue were usually closed during functions, but on that day, they were open to the public during the event. They felt this was done to allow the smooth entry and exit of the shooter. A 1-minute clip was released on YouTube by a witness at the scene. The recorder appears to have been on the stage while making the video, which shows the faces of some of the members of the mariachi band playing an accompaniment of Vicente Fernandez's El Señor de las Canas, performed by the former lead singer of Banda El Recodo. A man dressed in a blue and black clown costume with purple headgear and a red nose with his face painted white could be seen walking past the camera and in what is guessed to be the direction of Francisco Rafael. Another man seen signaling towards the camera is believed to be the assassin's accomplice, and he appeared to be leaving the building during the filming. A shot was heard off camera, but the music continued, with nobody realizing what was happening until 4 more gunshots were heard and the party erupted in pandemonium. The video shows Jared Borghetti sitting with Francisco Rafael's wife, Rocio del Carmen Lizarraga. It also identifies Hector Lopez, a former Cruz Azul player at the event. In January 2014, the Office of the General Prosecutor, or PGR, mentioned Jose Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa, alias El Chino Anthrax, the head of a military arm of the Sinaloa cartel called Los Anthrax, as a probable man behind the attack. According to photographs from the agency, Arechiga Gamboa and Francisco Arellano had met at a promotional event for an upcoming boxing match between Omar Chavez and Joaquim Alcine in Los Cabos 2 days before Francisco Rafael's assassination. The PGR thought the attack might have resulted from Francisco Rafael's involvement in a money laundering scheme, and the Sinaloa wanted to establish their control over the Los Cabos area. They also feel the strike might have been called by Ismael El Mayo Zambada, and they identified 2 other possible killers. One was El Chino Anthrax's close assistant Noe Castro, aka R1, and another man named R13. They also carried out anthropometric studies to see if El Chino fit the dimensions of the assassin, but insiders in the crime underworld strongly suggest that El Chino was the one that pulled the trigger on Francisco Rafael for the control of the Los Cabos Plaza. Francisco Rafael might not have been the biggest name in the Tijuana cartel, but he might have retired early from the most obvious parts of the gang's operations. But history never forgets, and blood, sometimes, is the only acceptable payment for a man's crimes in the world of narcotraficantes. So, what do you think of Francisco Rafael Arellano Felix? Drop your comments and suggestions below, and give this video a thumbs up. Also, remember to subscribe to our channel cause you don't want to miss the next one. Thanks for watching, see you around.